Hello and welcome to the Entrepreneurship 3rd edition textbook, chapter 14, Navigating Legal and IP Issues. Before I start this chapter, I do want to let you know that I am not an attorney, nor do I represent an attorney, nor do I work for a law firm. So any legal implications or questions should be spoken with an IP attorney or a business attorney. I am just giving you the educational content behind navigating legal and IP issues. So some legal considerations you should think about is some of the startup legal costs. Typically, if you're starting a business by yourself, there's really nothing per se that's legal costs. You'll pay for your LLC startup, LLC documents, and if you have a specific type of company, you're saying like a chemical company or something, or restaurant, there's some legal cost to that. But typically, if you're just starting a consulting company, right, you're not going to run into a huge legal cost. Usually now there are documents you can find online and use. But if you do need legal counsel, there's some resources out there you can find. If you are, of course, going to file a trademark or a patent, the United States Patent and Trademark Office is your best resource for that. There is the Small Business Administration sponsors the SCORE Association. The SCORE Association has chapters throughout every single state. So just go on the SCORE website, score.org, and then type in your zip code and you'll be able to find your local chapter. And SCORE is basically a bunch of semi-retired or retired business owners who provide their services for free to folks who want to start a business or who own a business. So that is definitely a good place to start and look for, to start and talk to folks who've been in business. If you are going to have partners in your company or a partner, I strongly consider to have a founder's agreement between key issues, right? It may not be a full legal document. Of course, you can run it through an attorney. But if you're going to have people work with your company, you definitely need some type of document written down that regards to ownership, regards to what happens if, you part ways, money, how much percentage, who controls what. It's better to do and write all those things down now before money gets involved. Vesting co-founders is basically the concept of imposing equity forfeitures on co-founder over a certain period of time should they not stay with the company. Of course, a company's legal structure affects the authority, so business tax-wise and all that, and records and documentation. So do your research to determine what type of way that you want to structure a company. Sole proprietorship is basically a one-person company. It's a business owned by one person who has full exposure to liabilities. So yes, you get all the record and title profits, but you expose yourself to legal liability. If you're going to open a brick and mortar store, you should not be registered as a sole proprietor, because if you get sued, they're going to come after your personal things. A general partnership is basically a business owned by two or more people who have made a decision to share the profits and losses. So again, each partner reports profits and losses on their individual taxes rather than at the corporate level. And tax are also paid at the personal income tax rates. So again, if you're going to have a partnership, make sure you get those legal documents. A C corporation is basically a separate legal entity that this tax entity created through state government and owned by an unlimited number of shareholders. The most money shareholders can lose is their personal investments. Continuing on from the C corporation, it's continuous existence, so will still survive after the owners. Corporations not very they are not very time consuming to set up, but of course there is more paperwork to do so. An S corporation is a type of corporation that is eligible for special tax status. Of course, it must be a U.S. domestic corporation and no more than 100 shareholders. The income and losses are passed through the company's shareholders' tax returns and taxed at individual rates after deduction. Limited liability company, which is typically what a lot of people start off with. LLC is a structure that combines the tax advantage of partnership with limited liability benefits of corporation without being The eligible requirements of a C Corp, profit and losses are reported on individual tax returns. And there's potential tax sheltering from losses from personal assets. So again, I would probably recommend you probably start an LLC if you're a one-person shop or you're the business owner. There are limited partnerships and limited liability partnerships. The LP pass-through tax entity with either general partners who manage the business by personal exposure for its liabilities. And then the limited liability partnership is exchange for registering with the state and paying annual fee. Of course, you get a form of limited liability from your partners, and of course, the partners are still not protected from consequences. So, again, determine what best works for you. Benefit corporation, if it's something you've seen recently, or known as a B Corp, it's certified by a nonprofit B Lab, which ensures the strictest standards of social and environmental performance, accountability, and transparency. So that you typically see, a for-profit company has a social mission. There are nonprofit entities as well. If you want to start an entity which is exempt you from income tax, I would be very careful if you're going to start a nonprofit. All nonprofits are exempt from income tax on their profits. But you got to be very careful if it truly is a nonprofit, right? All the profits must be reinvested. No earnings can benefit individuals. So it's not like a for-profit company where you keep the earnings. You got to reinvest the earnings. You can pay yourself if you form a nonprofit organization, right? Pay yourself a salary as an employee, but you can't benefit from the earnings. You got to reinvest it into the nonprofit because you're basically exempting from income tax. So you gotta be careful. There's a lot of paperwork with there though. There is a lot of mistakes common among entrepreneurs when they start off, right? Never let advice from people be substitute for professional guidance. Every state has a different function of how they set up. So again, do your homework. What that entails. Intellectual property is basically intangible personal property created by human intelligence, so such as ideas, inventions, slogans, logos, and processes. Right now, with the formation of AI, it is very important to know that if a picture was solely created from AI, it is not protected IP. So IP protection only is for when a person is actually creates a document from their human intelligence or idea or themselves. I would definitely consider IP protection, your intellectual property rights, or learning if you create like a toy or some type of tangible product. If you are a consultant and you created this framework that makes money or something in that sense, it's a very protected framework, then I would probably put an IP. Just know that it costs money to do so. Again, it's very complicated. You're going to have to seek legal advice. More than likely, you're going to have to get an attorney involved to submit your paperwork for that. There are 4 types of intellectual property, right? Copyright is a form of protection for your original work, such as literature, music, drama, choreography, art, motion pictures, sound recordings, and architecture. So if you write a book, you can get that copywritten. It's not that difficult to submit your own copyright, so you can submit that. Trademark is any word, name, symbol, or device used in a business to identify, and it makes it, once you trademark the name or the logo or symbol, then of course people can't use that. Trade secret, basically a trade secret is a confidentiality form that provides companies with a competitive edge that was not in the public domain. That can form a formula, pattern, customer list, programs, devices, methods, techniques, and processes. Like the formula for Coca-Cola is a trade secret. No one will ever know what it is. The formula for WD-40 is a trade secret. So you can have a trade secret. That's totally fine. Patents, right? A patent is exclusive property rights for inventions. So just because you have a patent on a product or an invention doesn't mean that it's going to be successful. It just means that it's protected, and of course, if you do patent a product, it is for public view because you have to upload it. And people can see that. Non-disclosure agreement. Typically, some some companies ask you to sign a non-disclosure agreement or confidentiality agreement, which means that you're not going to share any of the IP or any of the information. NDA should not be used when you just have a half-baked idea, or like, if you have an idea, they'll be like, oh, you got to sign my non-disclosure agreement. No one's going to sign that, all right? Nobody cares about your idea. There's a difference between you have an actual product that you've already developed and you want to make sure that you protect it from getting out in public view. That's one thing. But if you just have an idea, no one's going to want to sign that. No one's going to sign a non-disclosure agreement because it's an idea. So again, it depends. Don't be offended if someone doesn't sign your non-disclosure agreement. There is, of course, global IP theft, right? Recent statistics show that global online piracy is huge amongst movies, music, software, games, and ebooks. Of course, IP theft costs the United States $225 to $600 billion a year. Again, you got to know how you protect your rights when you're, and when you have IP rights, it could be territorial, right? Just because your IP is protected in the United States doesn't mean that it's protected all across the world. Research other IP laws across the world if you may have to file IP protections in different countries. So again, do not rely on your patent for business strategy, right? Just because you patent something doesn't mean that the business is going to come. You still got to build customer relationships. You still got to promote. You still got to find a market for people to buy your thing. Some common IP traps: publicly disclosing your mention, right? Disclosing your new product in public view. Again, just be careful with that. Or failure to protect product and processes. So be very careful with that. Inability to determine originality, right? Entrepreneurs often build an existing product to create their invention, their innovations. Failure to assign ownership, so who owns it, and of course, failure to protect global markets. So, just because you protect the United States doesn't mean that somebody else across the world can take your idea. Hiring employees, right? There's more to hiring process than interviewing, so you got to understand the federal and state laws. The equal employment opportunity, right? Federal law prohibits discrimination against employees based on race, sex, creed, religion, and color. And again, some workers with disabilities are also protected. And, some states forbid discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. Employer identification number, right? For your hiring employees, you got to get their identification number. For IRS, right? New employees must get registered. Then you have to have unemployment and workers' comp. Withholding taxes, of course, keep records of it. Set them up forms, W-9s. Make sure you provide the right forms for if you have contractors or full-time employees. Benefits, of course, the basic requirements of Social Security taxes, family medical leave, and health insurance. Safety, make sure people don't get injured if you have a physical location. Payroll, make sure you maintain that payroll. Of course, are you hiring a contractor or an employee? Independent contractors save you money because they are responsible for their own taxes. But again, there are legal consequences for misclassifying contractors. An amount of control employer has over work, right? If you have an independent contractor, it's not as easy to control as compared to an employee who works there full time and receives benefits. So just be very careful what type of employee you're hiring. And of course, compensating employees, right? Be very careful as to if you're going to have unpaid interns. There are now states that have very strong rules and laws on unpaid internships. And so be very careful on that and make sure you compensate your employees equally and with equity. And that is it for this chapter. Thank you.